In the last episode, Chijioke, Izenwa, and the assassin had planned to double-cross the kidnappers that took Amaka, Chijioke's loving wife. That evening after the call, the air was heavy with tension as Chijioke stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker beneath the black Lagos sky. His mind was a mess of fear and regret. The reality of what was about to happen gripped his chest so tightly, he could hardly breathe. He turned away from the window, his hands balled into fists. Izenwa's voice echoed in the room, calm but firm. Everything is in place. The assassin is ready. Once the money's exchanged, he'll handle the rest. Chijioke shook his head. I told you, Izenwa. I need to be there. I won't let someone else risk their life to bring her back. I can't. Izenwa stepped closer, cutting him off, his expression dark. We've been through this, Chijioke. You're not trained for this. These people are killers. The assassin will get her out, safely, without a hitch. You being there complicates everything. Chijioke's jaw clenched as his eyes flickered to the duffel bag resting on the table. The ransom. 100 million naira, packed neatly, waiting to be handed over. Felt like a sick joke. All his wealth, all his power, and here he was, at the mercy of faceless criminals. I have to see her, Chijioke said quietly, his voice rough. I won't just wait here while they decide whether to kill her. I need to know she's alive. Izenwa sighed, his patience clearly thinning. The minute you walk in, they'll know something's off. You'll be putting her at even more risk. Why do you think we hired the assassin? I don't care. Chijioke snapped, his voice rising. I'm not some puppet master sitting on the sidelines. This is my wife, Izenwa. I won't sit back and wait for someone else to clean up this mess. There was a long pause as Izenwa studied him, his eyes narrowing. Your emotions are clouding your judgment, Chijioke. This isn't about heroics. It's about doing what's necessary to get her back. Alive, Chijioke's hands shook as he paced the room, trying to rein in his frustration. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, the adrenaline coursing through him. Izenwa didn't understand. This wasn't just about a simple rescue. This was about redemption. Chijioke knew, deep down, that his actions had set this nightmare in motion. His lies, his manipulations, Amaka was paying for his sins. And now he had to face the consequences. You're either with me or you're not, Izenwa, Chijioke said through clenched teeth. But I'm going. End of discussion. Izenwa stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and grabbed the duffel bag off the table. Fine, he muttered, slinging the bag over his shoulder. Let's go. The car ride was suffocatingly silent. Chijioke sat in the passenger seat, staring at the dashboard, his mind a blur of worry. Izenwa drove with his usual calm precision, but the tension between them was thick, the air heavy with unspoken arguments. The plan had been simple. Pay the ransom, get Amaka back, let the assassin handle the kidnappers. It was clean, efficient. But now, everything felt uncertain, like they were driving straight into the jaws of chaos. I know you're scared, Izenwa said suddenly, breaking the silence. His eyes stayed on the road, but his tone was softer now, less sharp. But you need to understand, this situation is volatile. You walking into that warehouse could tip the balance in the wrong direction. Chijioke swallowed hard. He didn't respond. He couldn't, because deep down he knew Izenwa was right. But he also knew that if anything happened to Amaka, if she didn't come home tonight, he would never forgive himself. How did we get here? Chijioke muttered under his breath, his voice barely above a whisper. Izenwa glanced at him briefly, then turned his attention back to the road. You let your doubts get the better of you. Chijioke flinched at the truth in those words. His doubts about Amaka's love had started this entire spiral. He had gone so far to test her, to push her, to make sure she wasn't just with him for the money. And now, she was in the hands of kidnappers, her life hanging by a thread. They drove in silence the rest of the way. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Izenwa parked a few blocks away, hidden behind an abandoned building. They both sat in the car for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. We walk from here, Izenwa said quietly, "Killing the engine." Chijioke nodded, feeling his pulse quicken. His mind was racing. What would Amaka think when she saw him? Would she be angry? Confused? Would she even be alive? They stepped out of the car, the cool night air hitting Chijioke like a wave. Every nerve in his body was on high alert as they made their way toward the warehouse, the shadows swallowing them as they crept closer. The warehouse was dimly lit, with only a few flickering bulbs casting weak light over the large, open space. As they approached the door, a figure stepped out of the darkness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a hood. "You have the money?" the man asked, his voice cold and gravelly. Izenwa nodded, holding up the duffel bag. "It's all here. 100 million, as agreed." The man's eyes flicked to Chijioke, sizing him up. "And who's this?" "I'm here for my wife," Chijioke said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. The man chuckled darkly. "Brave man. Let's see if you still feel brave once you see her." Chijioke's heart dropped into his stomach. The man motioned for them to follow him into the warehouse. Chijioke's legs felt heavy as they crossed the threshold, the faint light doing little to ease his anxiety. He scanned the room, searching desperately for Amaka. His breath caught in his throat when he finally spotted her. She was tied to a chair in the middle of the room, her head slumped forward, her body limp. For a moment, Chijioke's mind went blank. Was she alive? Was she hurt? "Amaka!" he called out, his voice trembling. She stirred at the sound of his voice, slowly lifting her head. Her eyes were wide, dazed, but when they focused on Chijioke, they filled with a mixture of shock and something else. Something he wasn't ready for. Suspicion. "Chijioke," she croaked, her voice hoarse. What's happening?" Chijioke's throat tightened. He wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. But he couldn't. Not with the kidnappers watching his every move. "It's going to be okay," he said instead, his voice tight. "I'm here." Amaka's brow furrowed, her confusion deepening. Why are you here? What's going on?" Before Chijioke could answer, the man who had brought them inside stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest. "Enough talking," he said, his voice like ice. "Let's get this over with. You give us the money, we give you the girl. Simple." Izenwa took a step forward, holding out the duffel bag. "It's all here. Now let her go." The man nodded to two of his men, who moved to untie Amaka from the chair. Chijioke's heart raced as he watched them. The seconds stretched on endlessly, every movement feeling like it was happening in slow motion. Amaka winced as they pulled her to her feet, but she never took her eyes off Chijioke. There was something in her gaze, something dark and unspoken. She didn't trust him. Chijioke's mind raced. Could she know? Could she have figured out that this all started because of his insecurities, because of his need to test her love? The moment was cut short by the sound of a gunshot. Everything exploded into chaos. Chijioke barely had time to register what had happened before the warehouse erupted into violence. Men were shouting, gunfire echoed through the space, and in the midst of it all, Chijioke saw a flash of movement, a figure darting through the shadows. The assassin. Izenwa grabbed Chijioke by the arm, pulling him behind a stack of crates. "Stay down," he hissed, drawing a gun from his jacket. Chijioke's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't the plan. Chijioke's mind raced as the chaos engulfed the warehouse. Gunfire echoed off the metal walls, loud and deafening, as bullets ricocheted in every direction. Men were shouting, scrambling for cover, and the sound of footsteps rushed around him. His heart pounded in his chest, drowning out all other sounds. He ducked behind the crates with Izenwa, his back pressed against the cold metal. "What the hell is happening?" Chijioke gasped, his voice shaking. "The assassin must have taken his shot," Izenwa hissed, peeking around the corner of the crates. "Stay here. Let him handle it." Chijioke's hands trembled. The plan was falling apart before his eyes. He tried to focus, tried to make sense of what was happening, but all he could think about was Amaka. He couldn't see her anymore. The moment the gunfire started, the kidnappers had dragged her back toward the shadows, away from his sight. "Amaka!" Chijioke shouted, his voice cracking as he crawled out from behind the crate. His mind was consumed by fear. He had to get to her. He had to make sure she was safe. "Chijioke, no!" Izenwa's voice was sharp, filled with panic, but Chijioke ignored him. His body moved on instinct, driven by pure adrenaline as he darted forward. Another gunshot rang out, so close it felt like the air had been ripped apart. Chijioke flinched, feeling the heat of the bullet pass by him, inches from his body. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to keep moving. He caught a glimpse of the kidnappers, still dragging Amaka toward the far side of the warehouse. One of them was shouting orders, while the others clutched their guns, firing wildly into the darkness. And then he saw him, the assassin. He was moving like a shadow through the dimly lit space, his body blending into the surroundings. He was fast, efficient, taking down the kidnappers with deadly precision. One by one, they fell, dropping to the ground with barely a sound. Chijioke's breath caught in his throat. This was what he had paid for, this cold, ruthless efficiency. The assassin had been hired to eliminate the threat, and he was doing his job without hesitation. But there was something deeply unsettling about watching it unfold. The coldness of it all, the violence. And yet, Chijioke couldn't care about any of that now. Not when Amaka's life was at stake. He spotted her, still struggling in the grip of one of the kidnappers. Her eyes were wide with fear, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "Chijioke!" she screamed, her voice a desperate cry that cut through the noise. That one sound was enough to send a fresh wave of adrenaline surging through him. He ran toward her, his legs moving faster than he thought possible. He reached her just as the kidnapper shoved her into a corner, pulling out his gun and pointing it at her head. "Stop!" Chijioke shouted, his voice trembling. The kidnapper glanced over his shoulder, sneering at him. "You think you can stop me? This isn't your world. Rich boy." Chijioke's chest heaved as he stared at the gun, his mind racing. He wasn't armed. He had no way to fight this man, but he couldn't let Amaka die. Not because of him, not after everything he'd done. "Let her go," Chijioke said, his voice steadier now. "Take me instead. Just let her go." The kidnapper tilted his head, as if considering the offer, then laughed. "No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to enjoy this." The world seemed to slow down in that moment. Chijioke saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the fear in Amaka's eyes, the terror that reflected all the things he had feared most. Her life slipping away because of his failures. And then a blur of movement. The assassin. In a split second, the assassin appeared behind the kidnapper, his knife gleaming in the dim light. With one swift, deadly motion, the blade slashed across the kidnapper's throat, and the man dropped to the ground lifeless. Chijioke stared, frozen, as the assassin wiped the blood off his blade, his face expressionless. The warehouse fell eerily silent, the sound of gunfire gone. The kidnappers were either dead or unconscious, and the assassin stood among them like a ghost. "Get her out of here," the assassin said, his voice low and emotionless. Chijioke nodded, his body finally snapping into action. He rushed to Amaka, grabbing her arms and helping her to her feet. She clung to him, trembling, her face pale. "Chijioke, what is happening?" Chijioke couldn't find the words to answer her. His mind was still spinning, still trying to process everything that had just happened. He could feel her fear, the confusion that radiated from her, and all he wanted to do was make it go away. But he couldn't. Not yet. "We need to leave," Chijioke said softly, his voice shaky. "I'll explain later. Just, let's get out of here." Amaka nodded weakly, her legs wobbling beneath her. Chijioke wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her as they made their way out of the warehouse. Izenwa was waiting near the exit, his eyes scanning the area, his gun still drawn. "You got her?" Izenwa asked, his voice calm, as if they hadn't just been in the middle of a deadly firefight. Chijioke nodded. "She's safe. Let's go." They made their way back to the car, the tension still thick in the air. Chijioke helped Amaka into the back seat, his hands shaking slightly as he buckled her in. He could see the questions in her eyes, the suspicion that had been growing ever since the moment she saw him in the warehouse. As he slid into the passenger seat, he could feel her gaze burning into the back of his head. He knew what was coming. He had feared this moment, dreaded it ever since the kidnapping. But now there was no avoiding it. "Chijioke," Amaka said, her voice soft but filled with tension. "What the hell is going on?" He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing for an answer that would make sense. But the truth was, there was no simple explanation for what had happened. Not without revealing everything. And that was the part he feared most. I can explain," Chijioke stammered, running a hand through his hair. "But not now. We just need to get out of here. We're not safe yet." Amaka didn't respond, but the look in her eyes told him that she wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. Izenwa started the car, pulling out of the alley and driving them back toward the city. The silence in the car was suffocating, thick with all the things left unsaid. Chijioke's mind raced with everything he needed to tell her, everything he had kept hidden. He had done this to protect himself, to protect their relationship, but now all he had done was destroy the trust between them. Amaka stared out the window, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. She didn't say another word for the rest of the drive, but Chijioke could feel the distance between them growing with every passing second. They had escaped the warehouse. They had survived the kidnappers. But Chijioke knew, deep down, that his real fight was just beginning. The car pulled up to the mansion with a soft crunch of gravel. But inside, the tension was as sharp as a knife. The ride had been a suffocating silence, with Amaka staring out the window, her thoughts hidden behind a mask of calm. Chijioke's heart thudded painfully in his chest as they stepped out of the car, the weight of the unspoken words between them crushing him. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet, the grand halls echoing their footsteps as they entered. Amaka, without saying a word, walked straight to the living room. She didn't look back to see if Chijioke was following her. She didn't need to. The silent demand for answers was clear. Chijioke hesitated in the entryway, watching as Amaka stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, her eyes staring at him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being stripped bare. "Amaka, Chijioke started, his voice breaking the oppressive silence. "Tell me what's going on," Amaka interrupted, her voice sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. "Right now, Chijioke. No lies, no excuses." Chijioke felt the knot in his throat tighten. He had never seen her like this, so raw, so unguarded. Her face was pale, the faint bruise on her cheek a reminder of the ordeal she had just endured. The guilt gnawed at him like a living thing, twisting in his gut, but the words wouldn't come. How could he tell her the truth when he barely understood it himself? I was trying to protect you," he stammered, hating how weak he sounded. "I never wanted this to happen." Amaka's eyes narrowed, and she took a step toward him, her voice low and fierce. "You call this protection? Chijioke, I was kidnapped. Those men knew too much about us, about you, and the way you handled the situation. Something isn't right. You knew more than you let on. Why were you even there tonight?" "I had to be there," Chijioke replied, his voice cracking under the pressure. "I needed to see you to make sure you were safe. I couldn't just sit back and—" "Stop lying to me," Amaka shouted, her voice trembling. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her eyes were filled with unshed tears. "There's more, Chijioke. I know there is. Ever since the accident, you've been different, distant. I didn't want to believe it at first, but now I see it. This wasn't just about the kidnapping, was it?" Chijioke froze, her words hitting him like a sledgehammer. He could see it now, the cracks in his lies widening with every second. Amaka's suspicion had been growing long before tonight, and now it was spilling out, too raw to contain. She was demanding the truth, and no matter how much he tried to hold it back, it was slipping through his fingers. Chijioke's voice faltered, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him like a physical force. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "You're right." Amaka's breath hitched, her arms dropping to her sides as she stared at him in disbelief. "What?" I did lie, Chijioke admitted, his voice barely a whisper. About the accident. About everything. The silence that followed was unbearable. Amaka stood still, as if rooted to the spot, her face a mask of shock. The truth hung in the air between them, heavy and toxic, poisoning the space they shared. Chijioke forced himself to keep going, even though every word felt like it was tearing him apart. I was never paralyzed. It was a test, to see if you were with me for the money, or if you truly loved me. Amaka's eyes widened, and her lips parted, but no words came out. She stared at him, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Chijioke could see the pain flashing across her face, the betrayal settling in as she tried to process the enormity of what he had just confessed. I didn't mean for things to go this far, Chijioke continued, his voice desperate. I was afraid, Amaka. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe you were with me because of my wealth. It started as a small doubt, but it grew, and I thought, if you stayed with me after the accident, then I'd know for sure. Amaka shook her head slowly, as if trying to clear away the fog of confusion. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. You staged the accident? All of it? Just to test me? Chijioke nodded, shame burning his skin. Yes, but I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted you to get hurt. You never wanted me to get hurt? Amaka's voice was low, dangerous. You tested me. You lied to me, Chijioke. You made me think you were paralyzed. And all this time it was just a game to you? A test of my loyalty? Chijioke reached out to her, but she stepped back, her eyes blazing with fury. Amaka, please. I was wrong. I see that now. I shouldn't have doubted you. I thought it was the only way to be sure. Sure of what? Amaka snapped, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. That I loved you? After everything we've been through, after all these years, you still didn't trust me. Chijioke's heart twisted painfully in his chest. He had never seen her like this, so hurt, so betrayed. I made a mistake, he whispered, his voice breaking. I see that now. I don't expect you to forgive me. But please, Amaka, don't walk away. Amaka stood still, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her breathing. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She looked at him as if he were a stranger, someone she no longer recognized. I can't do this right now, she said, her voice cracking. I can't even look at you. She turned on her heel and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway like the closing of a door. Chijioke stood frozen in place, watching her leave, the reality of what he had done crashing over him in waves. The silence that followed was suffocating. Chijioke retreated to his study, sinking into the leather armchair behind his desk. His hands trembled as he pressed them to his face, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. How had it come to this? He had been so sure that testing Amaka's loyalty was the right thing to do. He had convinced himself that it was necessary, that without it, he would never know if her love was real. But now, looking back, all he could see were the lies and the pain he had caused. A knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Chijioke wiped his face with the back of his hand, straightening up as the door creaked open. Ezenwa stepped into the study, his face carefully composed. He closed the door behind him and approached the desk, dropping the duffel bag full of ransom money on the floor with a thud. It's done, Ezenwa said simply. Chijioke nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The adrenaline from the kidnapping had worn off, and all that was left was the sinking realization that his life was falling apart. Are you going to tell me what's going on? Ezenwa asked, raising an eyebrow. Chijioke hesitated. He didn't know if he could trust anyone anymore, not even Ezenwa, the man who had helped him orchestrate this mess in the first place. Something's not right, Chijioke muttered, rubbing his temples. Those kidnappers knew too much. They knew personal details about me. About us. Ezenwa tilted his head slightly, but his expression remained neutral. You think someone tipped them off? Chijioke nodded, his mind racing. It's the only explanation. They knew things they shouldn't have. Someone close to me. Someone betrayed me. For the briefest moment, Chijioke saw something flicker in Ezenwa's eyes. A flash of emotion, too quick to read. But before Chijioke could dwell on it, Izenwa cleared his throat and shrugged. Maybe, Izenwa said, his voice calm. Or maybe they just did their homework. It's not that hard to dig up dirt on someone like you. Chijioke frowned. Something about Izenwa's casual tone didn't sit right with him. But he couldn't put his finger on why. He had known Izenwa for years, trusted him. And yet, there was something off. Something Chijioke couldn't shake. I need to figure this out, Chijioke muttered, his voice tight. Izenwa nodded. But there was a strange glint in his eye as he turned to leave the room. Let me know if you need help. As the door closed behind him, Chijioke sat in silence, the knot in his stomach tightening. Something wasn't right. Amaka sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on the far wall, though her mind was elsewhere. The room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamps outside, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. She felt like a ghost in her own home, unseen, unheard, forgotten. Her thoughts churned, replaying everything Chijioke had just confessed. The test. He had lied to her, manipulated her emotions, made her believe he was paralyzed. All because he doubted her love. Her heart ached at the betrayal, but there was something deeper gnawing at her, something more insidious. It wasn't just that Chijioke had tested her, it was that he had never trusted her in the first place. All the moments they had shared, the love they had built, it had all been a house of cards, ready to collapse the moment Chijioke's insecurities got the better of him. She stood abruptly, pacing the room, her hands clenched into fists. How could he do this? How could he look her in the eye and pretend to be something he wasn't, just to see if she would stay? The thought made her stomach churn. A part of her wanted to confront him again, to demand more answers, but another part of her knew it wouldn't make a difference. Chijioke had already shattered her trust, and nothing he said now would change that. She felt a sharp pain in her chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and something else she didn't want to admit. Despite everything, despite the lies, she still loved him. That was what made this all so unbearable. She had given him everything, her heart, her loyalty, and he had thrown it all away with one cruel, calculated decision. Her mind drifted back to the moment she was kidnapped, the terror of being dragged into the unknown, the cold, rough hands of the men who held her captive. And then, there was Chijioke walking into the warehouse calm, almost too calm. Why had he been there? Why had he insisted on coming to the exchange? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces didn't add up. He knew. He had known something. That much was clear now. Amaka stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing as a new thought crept into her mind. What if the kidnapping wasn't just a random act of violence? What if Chijioke's test went deeper than she realized? What if he was involved from the start? The thought was almost too terrible to consider, but it wouldn't leave her. Could Chijioke have set this whole thing up? No, it seemed absurd, but the way the kidnappers had known so much about their personal life, the way Chijioke had been so calm, so sure of what to do, it all felt too convenient. Amaka's breath hitched, and she sank back onto the bed, her heart racing. She needed time. She needed space to think, to figure out what was real and what was a lie. If Chijioke had tested her loyalty, then it was time for her to do the same. Later that night, Chijioke sat in his study, staring blankly at the papers scattered across his desk. His mind was a storm of thoughts, but none of them made sense. Everything was unraveling faster than he could put it back together. The weight of Amaka's absence hung heavy in the house. He could feel the distance between them growing, even though she was just down the hall. He could still see the look in her eyes when he told her the truth. The hurt, the disbelief, the rage. What have I done? The question echoed in his mind, but no answer came. His phone buzzed, dragging him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was Dr. Kalu. Chijioke hesitated before picking it up, his grip tightening on the phone. Kalu, he answered, his voice strained. Chijioke. Dr. Kalu's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. I've been thinking about the situation. We need to talk. Chijioke rubbed his temples, already dreading the conversation. Now's not a good time, Kalu. I know, but there's something you need to hear. Dr. Kalu pressed, his voice dropping. It's about Izenwa. Chijioke stiffened, his heart skipping a beat. Izenwa. The name sent a jolt of suspicion through him. Something about their conversation earlier had left a bitter taste in his mouth. And now, Kalu was bringing him up again. What about him? Chijioke asked cautiously. Dr. Kalu hesitated for a moment, and Chijioke could hear him pacing on the other end of the line. When you told me about your plan, the paralysis, I may have let something slip. Chijioke's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I mentioned the plan to Izenwa, Dr. Kalu admitted, his voice tight with guilt. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. He's your friend, I trusted him. But now, I'm not so sure. Chijioke's heart pounded in his chest. You told him about the plan? I only mentioned it briefly, Dr. Kalu rushed to explain. But now, I'm starting to think he used that information. The way the kidnapping went down, it doesn't feel right. I think he knew more than we realized. Chijioke's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of suspicion that had been gnawing at him. Izenwa had been too calm, too calculated throughout the entire ordeal. And the kidnappers had known personal details about him. Details that only someone close to him could have provided. It all made sense now. Izenwa, Chijioke muttered under his breath, his voice trembling with anger. That bastard. Dr. Kalu's voice softened. Chijioke, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this far. But you need to be careful. If Izenwa is involved in this, then it's not over. Chijioke clenched his jaw, the realization hitting him like a punch to the gut. He had been played. Izenwa had manipulated him, using his insecurities about Amaka to orchestrate the kidnapping. And now, Amaka was caught in the middle of a game she didn't even know she was part of. I'll handle it, Chijioke said, his voice cold. Dr. Kalu hesitated. Be careful, Chijioke. Izenwa's dangerous. He's not the man you think he is. Chijioke hung up the phone without another word, his mind swirling with rage. Izenwa had betrayed him, not just as a business associate, but as a friend. And now, Chijioke would have to confront the man who had torn his life apart. But first, he needed to fix things with Amaka. He couldn't lose her, not after everything. But in that very moment, there was a knock on Chijioke's door. The knock on the door was soft but insistent, pulling Chijioke from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone this late, and a surge of unease rushed through him. He opened the door to find the assassin standing in the hallway, his face as unreadable as ever. The man stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence unsettling in its coldness. We need to talk, the assassin said, his voice low. Chijioke swallowed, stepping back to let him in. What is it? The assassin moved into the living room, his eyes scanning the space as if assessing every possible threat. Izenwa, Chijioke stiffened, his heart racing. How does he know? What about him? Chijioke asked, his voice guarded. The assassin's eyes narrowed slightly, his expression never changing. I've been watching him. He's not finished. He's tasted the money, the power. He'll come back for more. Chijioke felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying you're in danger, the assassin replied, his voice flat. Izenwa's a bigger problem than you realize. He's got contacts, people who can make things very difficult for you. Chijioke's mind raced, the weight of the assassin's words sinking in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What do I do? Chijioke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The assassin's gaze was piercing as he looked directly at Chijioke. You stop him. Before he stops you. The sun had barely risen, but Chijioke was already pacing the length of the living room. His mind raced, anxiety gnawing at his insides like a slow poison. He hadn't slept, not after the conversation with Dr. Kalu, not after the assassin's chilling warning the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, all he could see was Amaka's face, filled with anger and pain. He had to fix this. He glanced toward the staircase, half hoping to hear the soft sounds of Amaka coming down. But there was nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. It had been like this since last night. Amaka refusing to speak to him, her coldness cutting deeper than any words could. Chijioke's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, the familiar name sending a wave of tension through him. Izenwa. For a moment he considered ignoring it, but he couldn't afford to. Not now. He answered, his voice tight. Izenwa. Good morning, my friend. Izenwa's voice was smooth, too smooth, and it grated on Chijioke's nerves. I just wanted to check in. How's Amaka doing? Chijioke's grip on the phone tightened. He could hear the mock concern in Izenwa's tone, the subtle dig hidden beneath the surface. She's fine. Good. You know, Chijioke, I've been thinking a lot about loyalty lately. It's funny how we never really know who's loyal, even the people closest to us. Don't you think? Chijioke's chest tightened. Loyalty. The word hung between them like a loaded gun, ready to go off. Izenwa was playing games, pushing buttons he knew would hurt. What are you getting at? Izenwa chuckled softly, the sound sending a chill down Chijioke's spine. Oh, nothing. Just something to think about. But hey, let's grab lunch soon. We have a lot to discuss. Before Chijioke could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, the weight of Izenwa's words pressing down on him. It was clear now Izenwa was still in the game and he wasn't done yet. Later that morning, Chijioke found himself standing in front of Amaka's bedroom door. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. What could he even say to her? How could he make up for everything he'd done? He knocked lightly, his heart pounding in his chest. Amaka, he called softly, his voice shaking. Can we talk? There was no response, just the sound of silence pressing down on him. After a few more seconds, he pushed the door open slowly, stepping inside. Amaka sat on the bed, her back to him, staring out the window. She didn't turn to look at him. Amaka, he said again, stepping closer. I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you and I don't want to hear it, she said, her voice cold and distant. Chijioke's stomach twisted. He swallowed hard, trying to push through the knot in his throat. Please just listen. I know I made a terrible mistake. I've been thinking about it, and I realize now how wrong I was to doubt you. Amaka finally turned, her eyes hard and unreadable. Doubt me? She repeated, her voice laced with bitterness. Chijioke, this isn't just about doubt. You lied to me. You played with my emotions. You made me believe you were paralyzed. All because you were too afraid to trust me. I was wrong, Chijioke said, his voice cracking. I thought I needed to test you, but I see now that I was testing myself. My own insecurities. They've ruined everything. Amaka stood, crossing her arms over her chest. You think that's enough? An apology? She shook her head, her eyes flashing with anger. No amount of gifts or words can fix this. You've broken something between us, Chijioke. Something that I'm not sure can be repaired. Chijioke felt the sting of her words, each one cutting deeper than the last. I'll do anything, Amaka. Please just tell me what to do. I'll make it right. Amaka stared at him for a long moment, her expression softening just slightly. You can't fix this with money or apologies. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is trust. And right now, there's none left between us. Her words hung in the air, suffocating the hope Chijioke had clung to. He wanted to reach out, to hold her, but he knew that would only push her further away. He had to give her space, even if it killed him inside. I'll prove myself, Chijioke said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. I'll earn your trust back, no matter how long it takes. Amaka's eyes searched his face, as if she was trying to decide whether or not to believe him. Finally, she shook her head and turned back toward the window. We'll see. That evening, Chijioke stepped outside, needing to clear his head. The mansion felt suffocating, and his thoughts were too loud. Every conversation with Amaka replayed in his mind, each one leaving him more desperate than the last. The assassin's warning from the previous night echoed in his thoughts. Izenwa won't stop. He'll come back. But what could Chijioke do? He wasn't a man of violence. And yet, it seemed like violence was the only language Izenwa understood. The sound of soft footsteps broke through his thoughts. Chijioke turned, his heart skipping a beat as he saw the assassin standing near the gate, watching him with those cold, calculating eyes. Chijioke took a step forward, his pulse quickening. What are you doing here? The assassin didn't answer immediately. He moved closer, his gaze never leaving Chijioke's face. You're running out of time. Chijioke swallowed hard, the weight of the assassin's presence pressing down on him. What do you mean? Izenwa is still out there. He hasn't finished with you yet, the assassin said, his voice low and steady. He's already set things in motion. If you don't stop him now, he'll take everything from you. Chijioke's heart raced. What are you saying? The assassin's expression was unreadable, but there was something deadly in his eyes. I can handle him, permanently, but you need to make the call. Chijioke felt a cold chill run down his spine. The choice hung before him like a noose. Deal with Izenwa himself or let the assassin finish the job. Both options felt like traps, pulling him deeper into a darkness he wasn't sure he could escape. You think you can reason with him? The assassin continued, his voice cutting through the night air. You think he'll stop because you ask him to? Men like Izenwa don't stop. They don't care about apologies or peace. They want power, control. Chijioke's mind spun. Izenwa had been his friend, his confidant, and now the very person tearing his life apart. He didn't want to resort to violence, but could he really afford to wait? I need more time, Chijioke muttered. But even as he said the words, he knew they sounded hollow. Time's the one thing you don't have, the assassin said, his tone final. Make your choice, Chijioke, or I'll make it for you. Late that night, after the assassin left, Chijioke was still standing outside, staring up at the dark sky. The weight of his decision bore down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what he chose, someone would lose. As he turned to head back inside, the front gate creaked open. Izenwa stepped through, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the street lamps. Chijioke's body tensed, every muscle on high alert. Izenwa smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I thought I'd stop by. We haven't really had a chance to catch up. Have we? Chijioke clenched his fists at his sides. What do you want, Izenwa? Izenwa took a step closer, his eyes glinting with something dark. I think you already know, my friend. The words sent a jolt of dread through Chijioke. He had known this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to face. Izenwa wasn't just playing games. He was planning something that would destroy everything Chijioke had worked for. The game's only just begun, Izenwa whispered, his voice dripping with menace. And just like that, Chijioke realized that whatever happened next would determine everything. His wealth, his power, and his marriage to Amaka. There was no turning back now. The early morning light filtered through the curtains as Chijioke sat alone in the living room, his hands trembling slightly as they gripped his phone. He had sent Amaka 3 messages, all unanswered. He called twice, but she hadn't picked up. The silence was unbearable. She was testing him. He could feel it. Chijioke's thoughts churned. He had spent all night thinking of ways to win her back, ways to prove that he was willing to change. He had thrown money at the problem, set up lavish dinners, bought expensive gifts, but it was clear that none of that mattered to her anymore. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. What else can I do? His mind spun with desperation. Amaka was slipping further away from him, and every attempt to reach her only pushed her deeper into silence. The coldness between them wasn't just hurt. It was her way of punishing him, testing his resolve. But what did she want from him? His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. He glanced down, hoping it was Amaka, but his heart sank when he saw the name. Izenwa. A surge of anger rushed through him, and his hand tightened around the phone. He hesitated for a moment before swiping to answer. Chijioke, Izenwa's voice was light, almost casual. How's your morning? Chijioke's jaw clenched. What do you want, Izenwa? Izenwa chuckled, the sound low and mocking. Still so tense? Relax, my friend. I just wanted to check in on you. I've been thinking a lot about your situation. Chijioke's pulse quickened. My situation. The words felt like a trap. I'm handling it. Are you? Izenwa's voice turned sly, dripping with barely concealed malice. Because from what I hear, things aren't going so well with Amaka. It must be difficult, knowing she's slipping away. Chijioke's stomach twisted. How did Izenwa know that? Was he watching them? Following Amaka? Stay out of my business, Chijioke said, his voice tight with fury. Oh, but I can't, Chijioke. You see, your business has always been my business. Izenwa's tone shifted, becoming darker, more dangerous. And Amaka? Well, let's just say that you never deserved her. The words sent a cold shiver down Chijioke's spine. He had always known there was something more to Izenwa's obsession with Amaka, but hearing it spoken aloud filled him with a deep sense of dread. What are you talking about? Chijioke demanded, his voice trembling with barely restrained anger. You failed her, Chijioke, Izenwa continued, his voice cold. And soon, everyone will see just how much of a failure you are. The line went dead before Chijioke could respond. He stood there, frozen, the weight of Izenwa's words pressing down on him. It wasn't just a taunt. Izenwa was planning something. Something big. Later that day, Chijioke retreated to his study, the conversation with Izenwa replaying in his mind like a broken record. His hands shook as he poured himself a glass of whiskey, trying to calm the nerves that had been frayed to the breaking point. Izenwa's threat was more than just about Amaka. It was about everything, his business, his reputation, his entire life. Izenwa was planning to tear it all apart, and Chijioke knew it was only a matter of time before the blow came. The assassin's words echoed in his mind. Men like Izenwa don't stop unless they're made to stop. Chijioke downed the whiskey in one gulp, the burn doing nothing to ease the tension in his chest. He had spent the last few days wrestling with the decision, whether to take matters into his own hands and let the assassin deal with Izenwa, or try to find another way. But there was no other way. Not now. He stared at his phone, the assassin's number still saved from their last conversation. His finger hovered over the call button, his mind spinning. Is this really what I want? A knock at the door startled him. Chijioke set the glass down and turned as the door creaked open, revealing Amaka standing in the doorway. She was dressed to go out, her face calm but unreadable. Amaka! Chijioke's voice trailed off, unsure of what to say. I'm going out, she said simply, her voice flat. Where are you going? The question came out more desperate than he intended, and he winced at the sound of his own neediness. Amaka raised an eyebrow, her gaze cool. Does it matter? Chijioke opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He wanted to ask her to stay, to talk to him, to let him explain, but he knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made up her mind to distance herself, and every time he pushed, she withdrew further. Just be careful, he finally said, his voice weak. Amaka's eyes softened for a brief moment, but it passed quickly. I'll be back later. As she turned to leave, Chijioke watched her go, feeling a hollow ache in his chest. Is this how it ends? That evening, as the shadows deepened around the mansion, Chijioke sat in the study, the phone in his hand once again. He had been staring at the screen for what felt like hours, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a physical force. The assassin's words echoed in his mind. I can handle him. Permanently. Chijioke's hand trembled as he pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice, before the assassin's deep, cold voice answered. It's time, Chijioke said, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a calm, detached reply. Are you sure? Chijioke closed his eyes, the tension in his chest unbearable. He could feel the weight of his choice, could feel the line he was about to cross. But what choice did he have? Izenwa wasn't going to stop, not unless Chijioke made him stop. Yes, Chijioke said, his voice firmer now. I'm sure. Good, the assassin replied, his tone as emotionless as ever. I'll take care of it. The line went dead, and Chijioke sat there, staring at the phone in his hand. He had made the decision. There was no going back now. At a cafe across town, Amaka sat with her closest friends, the air around them filled with the low hum of conversation. She sipped her coffee, her mind elsewhere, lost in thoughts of Chijioke, of everything that had happened. Her friends' voices blurred in the background as she replayed the last few months in her mind. The lies, the betrayal, the hurt. It all weighed heavily on her. But beneath it all, there was something else. something she had been avoiding. She still loved him. Despite everything, despite the lies and the doubt, there was a part of her that still believed in the man she had married. She had seen glimpses of him recently, in the way he tried to make things right, in his desperation to fix what he had broken. Her friend, Uju, leaned in, her eyes filled with concern. "Amaka, are you sure this is what you want? Staying with him?" Amaka hesitated, her hand tightening around the coffee cup. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft. "I'm still angry, still hurt, but there's a part of me that wants to believe he can change." Uju sighed, her expression sympathetic. "Just make sure you're not holding on to the past. People change, Amaka, but not always for the better." "I know," Amaka whispered, "but if I don't give him one last chance, I'll always wonder." Her friends exchanged glances but didn't push further. Amaka's decision was clear, even if her path was uncertain. She would give Chijiok one more chance, but on her terms. Late that night, Chijiok sat in the darkened study, the room heavy with silence. The weight of his decision sat like a stone in his chest. The assassin had promised to take care of it, and now all Chijiok could do was wait. The door creaked open behind him, and Chijiok turned to see Amaka standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. "Amaka," Chijiok said softly, rising from his chair. We need to talk," she interrupted, stepping into the room. Chijiok's heart pounded in his chest as he watched her approach. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment that would determine everything. But as Amaka opened her mouth to speak, Chijiok's phone buzzed on the desk, cutting through the tension like a knife. He glanced down at the screen, his blood running cold as he saw the message. It was from the assassin. "It's done." Chijiok sat frozen, his hand trembling as he stared at the message on his phone. The words burned into his mind. "It's done." The assassin's calm, final message echoed in his head, leaving him numb. Izenwa was dead. Chijiok had wanted it, hadn't he? He had let things spiral too far, allowed himself to be consumed by fear and desperation. He had crossed the line, and now there was no turning back. But as the reality of his decision sank in, all he could feel was regret. "Chijiok," Amaka's voice snapped him out of his daze. She stood in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she took in his pale face and distant expression. "What's wrong?" Chijiok swallowed, his throat tight. He couldn't lie to her anymore. He had already done enough damage. But how could he tell her what he had done? How could he explain that the man who had threatened their marriage was now dead by his command? Amaka stepped closer, sensing the weight of his silence. "You're scaring me. What's going on?" Chijiok opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His heart pounded in his chest, guilt gnawing at him from every corner. He had promised himself he would never become like the ruthless businessman he had once despised. Yet here he was, responsible for a man's death, all because he couldn't trust the woman he loved. He dropped his phone onto the desk, his hands shaking. "Amaka, I made a terrible mistake." She tilted her head, her gaze sharpening. "What are you talking about?" He faltered, struggling to find the words. His voice was hoarse, thick with guilt. "It's Izenwa. He's gone. I had him taken care of." Amaka's eyes widened, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What do you mean? Taken care of? What did you do?" Chijiok could barely meet her gaze. "I let someone handle him. I thought it was the only way to stop him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Amaka stared at him, her expression unreadable, but Chijiok could feel the weight of her disappointment. She took a step back, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You had him killed?" she whispered, the words barely audible, but each one cut through him like a blade. Chijiok nodded, shame flooding him. "I didn't know what else to do. He was going to destroy us. Destroy everything." Amaka's face crumpled with a mixture of anger and hurt. She turned away, running a hand through her hair. "So that's it? You resorted to violence to solve the problem? You didn't even try to find another way?" Chijiok rose from his chair, desperation clawing at his chest. "I was scared, Amaka. I was scared of losing everything. Losing you." Amaka whirled around, her eyes blazing. And you think this fixes things? You think this makes it better? You've become exactly what you feared. Her words struck him hard, and Chijioke felt the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. She was right. He had let his insecurities push him to the brink, and now he was standing in the wreckage of his own choices. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I know I've ruined everything, but I didn't know what else to do. I was afraid. Afraid you didn't love me. Afraid you'd leave. Amaka's expression softened slightly, but the hurt in her eyes remained. Chijioke, I loved you. I still do. But this, she gestured toward him, toward the space between them. This isn't the man I married. You let your fear turn you into someone I don't recognize. Chijioke's heart ached. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Amaka stood there, staring at him, her emotions warring inside her. Chijioke could see the pain in her eyes, the disappointment. But there was also something else, a flicker of the love they had shared before everything went wrong. After a long silence, Amaka let out a shaky breath. I need some time, Chijioke. Time to think, to figure out if I can forgive this, if we can even rebuild from here. Her words crushed him, but he nodded. I understand. Amaka turned and walked toward the door, but just before she left the room, she paused. I don't want this to be the end, she said softly, her back still to him. But it's going to take a lot to fix it. With that, she left, and Chijioke was left standing in the empty room, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like 1,000 stones. Izenwa's hideout earlier that day. Izenwa sat at his desk, a smug smile curling on his lips as he finalized the details of his plan. His downfall was imminent, though he didn't know it yet. He believed he had won, that Chijioke was helpless to stop him. Dr. Kalu's betrayal had been easy to orchestrate. Feeding Izenwa information about Chijioke's insecurities had been like pouring gasoline on a fire. He had used every ounce of Chijioke's fear to manipulate the situation, and now he was ready to strike the final blow. Izenwa chuckled to himself as he typed an email to his contacts, preparing to leak the details that would destroy Chijioke's business. But just as his finger hovered over the send button, the door behind him creaked open. He barely had time to turn before the assassin's blade slid silently across his throat. Izenwa's eyes widened in shock, blood spilling from the wound as he gasped for air. His hands reached for his neck, but it was too late. The assassin's face remained emotionless as he watched Izenwa fall to the floor. The smug grin wiped away forever. The job was done. Back at Chijioke's mansion, Amaka sat alone in the garden. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn. She hadn't spoken to Chijioke since their conversation earlier that day, and her mind was swirling with thoughts. She still loved him. That much was clear. But how could she ever trust him again? How could she rebuild their marriage after everything that had happened? Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from her friend Uju. How are you doing? Still thinking of Chijioke? Amaka sighed, typing a quick response. I don't know what to think. I love him, but he's made so many mistakes. I don't know if I can ever trust him again. She hit send and stared at the screen for a moment. Her heart was heavy with indecision. But deep down, she knew that the love she felt for Chijioke wasn't something she could easily let go of. Despite everything, there was a part of her that wanted to believe he could change. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. She turned to see Chijioke standing at the edge of the garden, his face etched with guilt and sorrow. Amaka, he said softly, stepping closer. I know I've hurt you. I know I've lost your trust. But I swear, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can change. Amaka looked up at him, her heart pounding. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the pain of his own mistakes weighing on him. And for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. I don't need grand gestures, Amaka said quietly. I just need to know that you'll be honest with me, that you'll be the man I fell in love with. Chijioke nodded, his voice thick with emotion. I promise, Amaka. No more lies, no more tests, just the truth. Amaka studied him for a long moment, and then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. It's going to take time, she said, but I'm willing to try. Tears welled in Chijioke's eyes as he held her hand tightly. Thank you, he whispered. I won't let you down. For the first time in what felt like forever, they stood together, hand in hand, ready to rebuild the life they had almost lost. Days later, after dealing with the final remnants of Ezenwa's schemes, Chijioke and Amaka sat together on the veranda of their home. It was a quiet morning, the air crisp and cool, and for the first time in weeks, there was a sense of peace between them. Amaka glanced at Chijioke, a small smile playing on her lips. I never thought we'd get here, she admitted. Chijioke smiled back, his heart lighter than it had been in months. Neither did I, but I'm glad we did. Amaka took his hand, squeezing it gently. We'll be okay, she said softly. As long as we have each other. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, they sat together, hopeful for the future, knowing that they had weathered the worst and come out stronger on the other side. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any new stories on this channel. Also, here is another interesting story that you will enjoy. Click to watch now.